to get to mean time to innocence or root cause analysis, that kind of thing. And from there, I can do a search for a user, pull up the details, kind of walk through what I would look at,
Yep.
and that's usually good for 45 minutes.
All right. I think we are live. Check my meeting controls here. I'm missing something here. Oh, there we go. All right, cool.
There's a couple people in already.
Yeah. I'm going to wait till we have a few more of the attendees in. Turn the heater off quick. Luke, I don't know if if you just want to stay muted, that's cool. And then just hopefully I pause enough for you to interject if you need to.
Sounds good.
Oh, nice. Brad got to attend. I like it. Just going to wait a few minutes, like I said, see if we can get some more attendees. And if we can't, that's fine. We'll just kick it off. I don't want to, I know time's valuable, so I don't want to burn more of it than needed. So. Adam, did they send a reminder out? Or did you, by chance?
Yeah, I sent one out at 1 o'clock.
Okay. Probably another 90 seconds, then I'll just get moving on this. All right, I think I'm just going to start, and if people want to trickle in, they can. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Krudemski. I've been with Camera Corner for 9.5 years, and today we're going to be going over Aruba Central. Pretty much like a day in the life of a administrator that uses Aruba Central. Some of it's going to be more just like overview stuff because I don't know the level of central knowledge that everyone has. However, there will be some tips and tricks that I found along the way that should assist with, you know, running your Aruba Central instance even more efficiently. So today I am presenting this. However, my coworker Luke McCormick is going to be assisting. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, just type them in the chat. And if Luke can answer it, he will. And if not, he will escalate up to me. Today, we also have a RSE from Aruba, Jeff Trunk, who's joined us. Jeff will not only, you know, assist with potential questions that I myself don't know or that Luke doesn't know, but he'll also be interjecting if he there's something that he has to add. Jeff is crucial in our success with not only selling Aruba as a solution, but also troubleshooting things that come up along the way. So here's our topology that I kind of built for today. You don't need to like memorize this or anything, but I just kind of wanted to go over a little bit of what we have. So we actually have two buildings. We have a data center building and we have a design building. Okay. In the data center building, that's where we have our ISP. Our firewall device is an Aruba 7005 gateway. And then what we have is we have two 6300 switches that are linked together. And we have an AP in that data center that has a staff WLAN. I see that a lot, you know, in data centers. I see people, they have some sort of one-off SSID that just the IT staff use. That allows them to get to whatever they need to, which is helpful if you need to download ISOs or get to various equipment. We then have a LACP trunk that runs over to another switch that is also linked together. So what I did here is I have two CX switches at the data center, which is the new OS from Aruba or the newer OS. And then in the design building, I have two of the ProCurve switches because a lot of the customers, even Camera Corner, still runs on the ProCurve platform. And then within that building, we have a virtual cluster of two Aruba access points that have some other SSIDs. I have a bunch of wired and wireless devices all throughout, so that should help us in kind of being able to see some of the you know, things like how you can see applications, how we can do packet captures, stuff like that. So that's really all the slides I have. I think slides are pretty boring most of the time, so I'm just going to demo stuff. Again, if you have any questions, just type them in the chat, and Luke McCormick will try and answer them best he can. And if he needs to escalate them up, he can go to me. And if I need help, we have the man Jeff Trunk on as well from Aruba. So, all right, like I said, we're going to go over some of the items that may be obvious to those that have used Aruba Central or seen a demo before, but then we're also going to get into the nitty gritty of that. So to start, I just kind of want to go, once you log into Aruba Central, what you'll see is it'll bring you to the global page. What the global page does is it shows you all of the various sites you have. So say you have, you know, you're a school district and you have multiple buildings. What we can do is we can group those devices together into a site. And then we can see the health of all of those devices. So what it does is it starts at a very high level, right, with just a color scheme, right? So here we see the two sites. We have the design building and we have the data center. These are pretty close to each other. So what's cool is if you have like a real high, you know, maybe you have multiple sites in a town, and then you have multiple towns throughout like the state. What it'll do is it'll lump them together to just make it easier to read. But as you zoom in, it will spread those out. So what we can see here is we can see, you know, the individual device health, the client health, and then a thing called AI Insights, which we'll get to later. So again, all of this is clickable. What's great about Aruba Central is there's multiple ways to get to the different windows. And like I said, so for instance, if we click this, it would take us to the AI Insights tab of that specific site. So I keep referring to sites. What a site is a site is we create the site ourselves. and you put an address on it. And then what you do is you take devices that are actually at that site and you drop them into the site. And what that'll do is that'll help group it together so that APs across town aren't involved in the overall picture of what the health is like at that individual site. So it's really easy to create a site. All we do is we click new site, give it a name. And the reason you put an address in is it'll plop it down properly on that map that we were just looking at. And then what we can do is you can easily drag and drop devices into that site. Devices can only be a member of one site at a time. However, for like reporting purposes, they also have a thing called labels. So what labels are a way to be able to group devices into multiple buckets, right? And the reason you would do that is for things like reports. So for instance, if I want to run a report on everything related to wireless, I can run a report against that label, okay? If I ran a report against a site, I would miss some of the other wireless devices, right? And we'll get into the reports later. This is going to be a pretty in-depth overview of all of these things. Another thing is certificates. We can upload a certificate that may be for a captive portal. Maybe if you're doing RadSec, something like that. And then we can push that to multiple of your sites using this certificates pane. So back to the sites here. This is like a navigation pane here where we can go to configuration groups, sites, and labels, right? So if I click like the wireless labels, all it's going to show me is information about devices that have that label, right? But what we can do here is we can actually go into the site itself. So here we see the demo DC site, right? So this is 2 of our switches, and this is 1 of our access points and our gateway. So if I wanted to see what devices were actually a part of this site, right, we can click here, and here it filters it out by the various device types, right? So we have our 1 access point that we have at that site. We can click on switches here, and it'll show us the 2 switches we have. We can see a ton of information here. What's great is you get to kind of choose what you want to see here. So for instance, maybe you're interested in, you don't really care about the NAE status of the CX switch for whatever reason. We can uncheck that, but we can add in the firmware version and it'll actually show us that, right? And again, from here, we could click on one of these devices. So here's our DC rack 1, and we can click that device and it'll actually take us into that specific device, right? There are other ways to get there, but that's just a nice feature that it'll quickly take you there. At the site health here, right? What's great about this is this change log. If you ask me, this is one of the most important pieces. So if I go back in time here, up here, we can select 3 days, 1 day a week, etc. So this is helpful for like, if you come in on Monday, you probably want to look at your 1 week view, because if you don't have a lot of production happening or production or people in the buildings on the weekend, the 1 day is not really going to show you a lot. So when you come in, maybe you start out and you say you want to see what's happened in the last week, right? So here we can see the statistics about what kind of bandwidth, how many clients, what client types we're looking at. We can click these and it'll actually remove it from the map. But down in this change log here, you'll notice that the darker and the thicker that circle is, the more things that have happened, right? So we can go over a specific day and we can see the configuration changes, firmware changes and reboots, right? And then what we can do is if we click on that, it will bring up the actual logs of that information. So what we can do is we can open the configuration log and it'll tell us the user, the date, and then what was actually changed. And if we click that drop down, it will actually show us the code that was done during that change, right? In the firmware log, it'll tell us when, what firmware you went from and to, and when, which is a big one. That's a system because I actually initiated that from Aruba Central. And then there's also a reboot log. which is useful to tell you that when a reboot was done. This one was done by the system, but if one of your users initiated the reboot, it would tell you who was responsible for that. It will also show us what the down devices were. And remember, this is site-wide, so this is wireless and wired. Super helpful. And then on here, it'll tell us about like the uptime, right? If your radios are having issues with a lot of noise, it will put that information in here for you as well. Again, this is just like a 1,000-foot view to quickly see maybe what you need to investigate to help make your Monday go a little smoother, right? On the summary tab here, we have a bunch of graphs that show us all kinds of things, right? What's nice about these graphs is that you can make them specific if you want. You can also quickly add or remove certain things within that graph. It can tell you information about the number of clients you've had on your various WLANs. But what's nice here is you really want to keep an eye on the data, right? If all of a sudden you see that data spike up at a weird time, you're going to want to investigate that. We can get into that later. Because there may be somebody who's on your network who's doing things they're not supposed to. Maybe somebody's doing something like BitTorrent or something like that. But this is a good way to quickly see if that's going on. In the Wi-Fi connectivity piece, I'm actually going to change sites here because I got a little more action going on this site. What's great is as we, I'm going to do this one for a week. As your users connect to your Wi-Fi, the APs are constantly sending telemetry data up to Aruba Central, right? And what it's doing is it's watching things like the associations, the authentications, how long it takes the DHCP, if there's DHCP timeouts, and then your DNS, right? So what's nice about that is we can actually click in this and specifically see where our issue is. So why I bring this up is wireless, it hits all layers of the OSI reference model, right? So if you're having a DNS issue, a DHCP issue, an internet issue, it'll feel like a wireless issue, even though a lot of times we find it's actually not a wireless issue. People are able to associate and authenticate fine. It's maybe the DHCP server's out of leases, maybe the DNS server's down, or it's taking a long time. So what we can see here is we can see what's actually going on. Like why don't we have 100% on our DNS? And what it will do here is it will tell us which access point, is giving us that information. We can also look at the reasons why. And again, we can, if we hover over any of these things, they'll show us additional information. We can also see, this is a great one I like, maybe what DNS server is responsible for some of your failures, right? A lot of times you're going to see public DNS. Public DNS works great for your home, but maybe for a business, you might actually have a worse experience on the wireless because of it. Also, within the last about 18 months, Google's actually started throttling some people when they're using 8888. So it might be a better idea for you to either stand up a DNS server in a DMZ or set up proper firewall rules so that you're using your internal DNS for the guests so that it's quicker. Because you got to remember, every time you do a lookup, that's adding latency, and the more latency you add to your wireless network, the slower everything's going to be. So if you come in and you see DHCP success is in the tank, it's a good way for you to be able to focus on what you need to address when you're troubleshooting. Maybe you're out of leases. That happens quite a bit on guest networks, especially when events happen that are out of the norm, right? AI Insights is great. And what this is the actual AI engine that's built into Aruba Central. And what it's doing is it's watching things as they happen, using that telemetry data again on both the switch and the wireless, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to try and find issues before you hear about them, okay? And that's great because the last thing you want is your phone ringing off the hook, somebody beating down your door, and because you didn't have any visibility. As we know, a lot of times people aren't speaking up when there's actual issues. Well, this way, this will help you try and get ahead of those issues, right? So what's nice here is when we see an issue, like clients have had a significant number of low SNR minutes, for instance, right? We can drop that down and it will give us recommendations of things that we can do to help alleviate these issues, right? Down below here, this is called the card. These are called cards, right? So here on the access point card, if we expand that, we can see the actual AP that is affected there. There's only the 2 APs at this site. And for whatever reason, these clients are using this one. Initially, I had a really low SNR. I've since turned up the transmit power just like it told me to do. And that made that issue go away. We can also click on the clients here, and it'll specifically tell you which client is the telemetry, based on the telemetry, which client is responsible for this AI insight. I'll tell you right now, I'm in my basement. This is a tiny little like a USB wireless. That device is through a bunch of metal. My furnace is between the APs and that. So there's it's very hard for this client to get onto my wireless network. That's why it's part of this. So the other thing you can do here is there's drop downs, right? So we can click and it will tell us what is good and bad. Is it the uplink? Is it the downlink? You know, and again, all of this is clickable. Here we can see, you know, maybe in the middle of the night, there was a bunch of reboots in the AP. You had no idea, knowing nobody was in the building, etc. This can help kind of show you when things are happening when you're not around. Because I mean, we can't constantly watch these graphs. We have all these other things we need to do, whether it's make new users, whether it's deploy more machines, etc. So what this is a good way for you to hear and see things before they happen during, you know, your production. Here we can also see more about the DNS, right? Here we see a bunch of domain name doesn't exist. We can expand that and see a bunch of the failures via that access point. I'm not sure what access point that actually is. That give me a second here. 7420. Yeah, so that's actually the AP over there. Normally it shows the name. I'm not sure why it did that. I did have an issue earlier where I had the wrong password in, which I'm kind of glad I did, because it dirtied up this data enough so that I could show that, and that was probably part of it. You'll also see here that when you click in some of these cards, there is a way that we can bring this graph out even larger and see more data points, right? So let me go back into here. Now, we're all not up on this technology as you know. Some people are better with wireless, some people are better with switches. So what's great is that there's this search or ask Aruba up here. Now, what we can use this for is we can look for, if there's a term that we don't understand. For instance, if I don't know what 802.11r is, right? I'm not stuck to just go Google, right? What I can do is I can get Aruba's tailored documents that not only tell me about 802.11r, but they'll also show me where I can make those changes, right? So if I go up to here and I type 802.11r, right? And I hit enter. In this search, in this contextual search, it will actually show us, hey, 802.11r, it's this information. If you want to know more about it, you can read here. So if I open this up, it brings me into a glossary of terms, right? But maybe I want to say how to turn on 802.11r. And here we can, that's not working for me. Oh yeah, let me try enable. Here it'll actually bring up the how-tos on how to turn on certain things, and it'll actually guide you through. I wonder why that one's not working. it'll actually guide you through where you click and where you turn that on, right? I usually don't turn on 802.11r unless it's an all Mac network, because some older clients, they don't like it. So, and that's part of what it's saying here about make sure you check on the drivers. The other good thing that this search, the other thing that this search is good for is that you can look up clients in here, right? So we saw that Lab 10 PC earlier, right? So I can type that in here, and it will actually, man, this, I don't know what's going on with this. I cleared my cache, and I don't know if that has something to do with it, but there we go. So you can type in the MAC address, the client name, the username. You can also type the IP address, and here it'll actually bring up the client and give you like a quick shortcut to a bunch of things for the client. So here we can see, you can, like I said, you can see the name and the MAC address and the IP and, you know, what type of client it is, but we can also jump to insights. So if we click this, it will automatically take us into the actual, that's funny, I'm an admin here. It'll actually take us into the client, which it did here. And it will tell us what those insights actually are, right? So again, we can change this. I'm going to use, like I said, this isn't a very busy lab network. So a lot of times you're going to see me set this to a month. And part of that reason is I can get more data that way, right? So again, here we can click on this card and we can see, you know, the excessive Wi-Fi security key exchange failures, you know, and what AP that is. Now we should be able to type that in into that same search, and it should tell us about that. Right, so this is more what I was talking about. So here they'll explain this. If we click read, it will automatically bring us into that insight. It'll explain it, and then it'll go over, you know, some of the recommendations, etc. Again, you can use this to search if you wanted to, but what's nice is that piece is right up there for you. All right, clear that out. You go back to the, still got some more in the sites here. The other great thing about the sites is we can see actually our topology, right? So within the site here, we see the actual topology we have here. We have our design ID F2. We can click on the links between the two switches. It'll tell you what the port numbers it's using. We can click on, we can hover over the AP, hit show details, and it'll show us information about the AP that are relevant. We can change, you know, there's a bunch of different views, there's filters, etc. I'm going to show you a great one here. Oh, you got to go to the site. All right, so a lot of times we see issues where people deploy, like for instance, new VLANs, and they might forget to tag it on a link. So what we can do here is we can go into the overlays, and we can actually like select a VLAN. So there I select an iSCSI VLAN, and if I hover over this link, it'll actually tell us the link between these two switches. It's tagged on the left side, but it's missing on the right side, right? So what I would do now is I would go in and I would tag it on that port, which I'll do in a little bit, but I just want to show a little bit more about this. The other great thing about the topology view is this device right here is not managed in Central, right? This is a Cisco 3750. However, it uses LLDP to still figure out what port it's on. We can click this link here and it'll tell us what port is on either end. So that's really useful if you have, well, for instance, if somebody plugs in a switch they're not supposed to. As long as it runs LLDP, we'll find that information and it can show us on the topology map. But sometimes, you know, you're working your way through upgrading to Aruba, and you still, you know, you might have some closets that are running some other vendor equipment. So we can actually see that in the topology here. You know, we can expand devices like that you know, we can click on the actual, if I click on this, give me that detail. There we go. We can actually click on the name and it'll bring us right into the actual AP, right? We'll go over that in a second. And then the last upper tab here for sites is the floor plans, right? So what's nice about the floor plans is if you bring in your map, you upload your floor plan, you then measure out the distance, right? So you want to get it an accurate measurement of, you know, you try and find your longest wall and you measure that. You can use Google Maps, but the more accurate that is, the more accurate your map will be, right? And then what we can do is we can, you know, we can measure that, set the measurement. We can draw what's called a region, which is like, hey, my users are probably going to be in this area. So if you have, you know, if there's an outside space, you're not going to have users there. You don't need to worry about it. And then what we can do is we actually put these APs on the map. So what it'll do is it'll use how well the APs hear each other to kind of give you a heat map of what's going on, you know, in your environment. Now, it's not it's not the most accurate thing. A site survey is still going to be the most accurate way to do this. However, it does give you a good idea of what you can expect for your actual what your coverage is. Now, this isn't filled in very well because I only have 2 APs. In a real world environment, you're going to have a lot more APs. There's going to be it's going to use RSS triangulation as long as you have like 3 or more APs. I only have the 2, and they're actually sitting on a shelf above me. So this is kind of cheating here a little bit. But what's nice about this is it will actually, you know, if you don't know where this AP is, when we go into the AP later, it will show us on the floor plan where it actually is, right? Within the site, we can see all of the devices. Like I said, we can see all the clients as well. So on my demo site here, it's going to show me all of the clients, whether they're wireless or wired, and then also offline, right? Just because maybe somebody roamed out and I still want to know information about them. Maybe somebody's their device is off and they're going to turn it back on, right? So at least it keeps that information in here. So what we can do here is we can click on, you know, these filters if we want and see just wireless or just wired information. Again, one of the things I would recommend you do is this client OS right here. That's a really good one because that can help you kind of focus on, that's over here. That'll help you focus on, you know, if you notice a lot of the devices are poor after a setting change you made, and they're all the same kind of devices, like that's something you're going to want to look at. But another nice thing I like is the capabilities here. It just kind of lets you know, if you see a lot of your devices that have the capability to do 802.11v or 802.11k, you can feel safe to turn that on. Within this client window, we can also click actually in the client, right? So I'm gonna do that. Okay. And what we can see here is, the same kind of, all the in-depth information that we could see about the devices, we can actually see about the client as well. So what we have here is a data path, right? This actually tells us this client is connected to this SSID on this AP, which uses this switch, and then the gateway is how it gets out to the network, right? So what we can do here is we can click on one of these devices and it will bring us directly into that AP. We can, let me get back to that. We could click farther up the chain. We can scroll down here. We can see what the throughput's been. We can see the health of that client, the signal quality, retry frames, all of this stuff, right? There's a little, I don't think they show this well enough, but this is super useful, right? So you see how this little green check mark here, right? Normally you just think, all right, this client's good, whatever. Well, actually there's a trick to it, right? So if we pin this, what this does is every 5 seconds, Okay, so you know, this being in the cloud, the data is not live unless we use the go live button. But what it's going to do is it's going to kind of do like a live light. And what it's going to do is every 5 seconds, it's going to keep updating that information for 15 minutes straight. So what's nice about that is while you're in here and you're looking through, you're trying to figure out information about the client, it is keeping you up to date with things like the signal quality and the TXRX rate. And that's super important because if you see that start to wane, you know that, hey, I should probably jump down to the live events or I should start a packet capture, right? So that is a big one. It's most useful for clients because when you use it for devices, it just says, hey, it's connected on this port. But that is one of those features that even though we're in the cloud and we're on a slight delay, that'll keep that information up there. There's also the ability for us to use the go live button. So what this does is rather than have the information be on a delay, it actually takes us right in and shows us direct information as it happens right on the for this, it's the client view, right? So what this is going to do is this is going to map the signal to noise ratio and throughput of that client like to the second that it's actually using it. So this is a Chromecast Ultra. I have some Chromebox casting a YouTube video to it or whatever just to generate some data. But it's right, I mean, it's 4 feet from the AP, so it's pretty hot, but you can see that information live, right? You don't have to wait for it to fill in the graph. You can say, hey, give me that information. I need it now. And then that's a better way for you to actually be able to troubleshoot, because then you don't have to wait 5 minutes or even longer, depending on the type of information you're looking for, right? So we can turn that off here. And again, yeah, we can see the AI insights about the client specifically. And I don't think I have any for this guy. Yeah, this guy's been pretty happy. We can see on the location here. I was having issues with this before. It might be because I have this pinned. The location I know was working better for devices. I'm not sure why this isn't working, but what I like here is this session piece. So what this session piece does is, every Aruba AP has a layer 7 firewall built into it, right? So what's nice about that is it is aware of all of the applications, all of the destinations you're going, etc. So what we can see here is we can see the actual, IP sessions of what it's doing, what ports it's using, etc. This is great because maybe this, the network that this guy's on, we don't want people to be doing YouTube traffic, right? So we can block that, and I'll show you how we can do that later. But here it'll show us all of those individual sessions. It'll also show us the local sessions, which is nice if you have, local web servers, local application servers, etc. This is pretty great here. What I like is the category too, and I'll show you why in a second. But that category is huge because if it's part of, if there's a ton of it that's in streaming, and you're like, I really don't want people doing that on my guest network or whatever, we can just block at the application category level. There's also this really nice application section here, which will go in and show us, let's go back to 3 hours. It will show us how much data they've actually done, over a period of time. This is over the last 3 hours. We can go into the websites portion. And here, if there's some sketchy websites that it's seeing, it'll tell us about it in here. Some other things we can do with the clients, and this is all of the clients, right? But we can go into this live events. And what's cool about live events is live events will show you if the client was associated but DHCP failed. It will tell you that information. It'll say, hey, the DHCP timed out. It can show you things like roams. But what's really cool here is this packet capture feature, right? So I'm going to turn this on and we're going to start troubleshooting this client. So what this is going to do is, this doesn't require that I'm sitting at the desk between the client and the AP, to try and sniff all their traffic. Maybe there's some sort of wireless protocol issue. You could have this client could be on the other side of the United States or whatever, and you could still do a packet capture from the AP level. You don't need to know any of the CLI commands to achieve that. It doesn't have to be routable back to you, you know, through your network. You can actually do that piece in the cloud, right? So what it's doing in the background here is it's running a packet capture on the AP. It's looking for information specific to that client. And then what we're going to do is, after a little bit of time here, I'm going to hit stop troubleshooting, and it's actually going to package that up in a Wireshark file that we can then open up, and I'll show you that. So let's wait a minute here. We just want it to get some data. Hopefully it got enough time there. So here it'll say that the file is being prepared, right? And then here I can download the PCAP. So here it downloaded the PCAP file. Since this is a wireless client, I'll turn on my wireless filter. And here we can see all of the information going to and from, you know, with that client, right? We can see stuff like the, you know, QoS data, you know, maybe there's, you know, some bad TCP stuff. Maybe we need to look into that. Maybe that's just an issue with the client. Like I said, they're really close together. That's not helping the situation at all. But it'll also show you stuff like, you know, if it sends out a DHCP request, it doesn't get one back. So these are super helpful, not only for you, but also for things like, we run a lot of times, we run into where the vendor says, hey, I need a packet capture to prove that. Well, hey, we can prove it now. You don't even need to be there. You don't even need to know how to really run packet captures. We can do it right on this, this platform itself. All right. In the events tab, what this will do is this will keep track of all of the things that this device does, all of the logs over the period of time that you want. What's cool here is we have up to a month that we can keep, right? So if I go here, again, this client isn't very busy, but I'll show you some of the other ones that are. And here we can see things like when the DHCP was acknowledged from the server, what server it was, the BSS ID. We can download this information. So if you want it in like a CSV, we can download that there. Let me bring that up to you guys, right? So we can sift through that later. You know, you can run all your filters and stuff that you would in Excel up in here as well. You can maybe send that to a tech and have them go look out and take a look at what's going on. We can also filter this stuff right in here, right? So if we only care about the acknowledgements, it'll filter that out for us. We have some tools here that we can use as well. So we could ping the client, right? So I could say, hey, AP, let's ping this client. We can hit run here, and it'll show us the actual output of the ping that it's doing to the client, right? This can also do speed tests to iPerf server. So if you have a little iPerf server or you want to set one up, it can do speed tests that way. Here we can see that that's pretty fast. I mean, it's on the same network, right? We can email this information up here. We can also save this out if you want. There's also some commands we can run, right? So when I started on the Aruba system, I didn't know a lot of on the wireless side, a lot of the commands that I needed to run, right? I wasn't sure about, well, do I need this? Like, how does this work, etc. So what's great here is they actually have a lot of this built in, and it's actually searchable, right? So if I was like, all right, I want to see information about, you know, the BSS ID table of this AP, all I need to do is select the commands that I'm interested in, hit add, and then we can click run, and it will do that for you. So you don't need, you don't need to be a whiz on the CLI to find that information out. Here we can see the different SSIDs I have, what channels I'm using, etc. So you can do that at an AP level. You can do that. There's some client information in here that if you wanted as well. And then the last thing, which is pretty cool, is there's going to be some actions here, right? So we can blacklist this client if we're interested here with the block client, right? And what that'll actually do is it'll block that client, and we can look later to see, oh, hey, that client's blocked, and we can unblock it. So the other thing we can do is we can actually disconnect the client from the AP. So maybe we're doing some troubleshooting, and we want to, and the issue only happens when the user comes onto the wireless network. We can just click disconnect AP, and bam, that device is it's sent down to the AP group or the virtual cluster, and it kicks that client off. Okay. All right. That's the client piece. All right. Now what we're going to dive into some of the things we can do with the actual devices themselves, right? So that was the client end. Here's some of the device stuff we can do, right? So I'll go into this AP here. And again, we can see all of the information about, serial numbers, et cetera, which is great because a lot of times, like if an AP is up, but then it goes down, how are you going to find out what that serial number is, right? So what's cool is even if this AP is down, we'll be able to see that information. Here we can see radio stats, which is great, right? Things that stick out to me is what's the transmit power, what channel is it using? We can see if there's, the SSIDs, if there's clients on them. AI insights specifically about this access point, right? See if this floor plan piece, yeah, there we go. So here is that floor plan, and it showed us actually where that AP is on the floor plan. Hilariously, it's using GeoIP, so it knows it's public IP. This is actually kind of close to my house. It's not in the office where I've tricked it. We can go into the performance section, right? And here we can see, specific information about, let's go back to something a little more recent, right? You can see how many clients are on there. We can see, here's a really great one, right? On the RF, we can actually see the channel utilization. This is big, right? Because if you run out of channel utilization, I don't care how good of a connection you have. I don't care how good your internet is. You're going to have a bad time on the wireless, right? So we can actually see historically, is it what's causing the channel utilization? Like here we can see non-Wi-Fi interference, right? We can see watch the noise floor change. We can see the frames, which is a big one, right? If you're getting a lot of retries, that's usually either related and your channel utilization isn't high. You need to look at the clients and try and figure out what ones are doing those retries, right? You can also see the channel quality, and that's for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. We can reboot the AP. We can do we can actually console into the access point, which is cool. So one advantage to the Aruba platform over their competition is some of their competition is cloud only. There is no CLI. If there's a CLI, only the tech support can get in it. Well, here we can actually have a full CLI. I can run show commands. I can take devices out of Aruba Central if I want to run any commands I need. I can see all of that information. I can do that remotely. I do not need any access to this device whatsoever, right? As long as it's in Aruba Central and it's communicating with Aruba Central, that's all I need. All right, let me close that. And then one of the coolest features, which was added recently, is the spectrum view. Okay, so what I did is on the APs, you can actually flip the radios into what's called a spectrum mode. Okay, so what I can do with that is it will, instead of serving clients, it will actually listen. Let me go to the other AP, see some information on there. It will actually listen to the air and look for things like, like what's causing your interference. This isn't the one I wanted. What's causing your interference? Maybe it'll tell you how busy the channels are. Because what you might see is that one of, if somebody, imagine you're in like a very busy part of like a downtown and there was a lot of businesses around you. What might happen is you might have where people are on the same channels as you are, right? So what's nice about this is it will tell you how busy those other channels are And what's cool about this is you could just turn this on for a couple hours. You could turn this on for an evening, whatever. And then what it will do is it will actually find things like, this is a source of interference, right? You'll notice Bluetooth in here. You might see other APs. And then, what it'll do is it'll tell you, some of the, like the highest interfering other SSIDs from some of your, other people in your area. Let me show that again on the other AP. Right, so I can see some LTE unlicensed, which is interesting because this is in my house, so who knows what that is. But what we can do here is we can, here we can see the max AP signal and what its SSID is, right? So here you'll have, like, that's my home one there, got stuff like that. So so that was added recently. It's really nice. And again, you don't need to be on site. You don't need to you don't need to bring an extra AP. You can flip an AP for a couple of hours, bring that information in, and then review it later, right? You can see all the clients on the AP. Here's a great one, right? This is called the audit trail. So what this is useful for is, say you're a member of a team, right? Sometimes people have the luxury of being a member of an IT team, right? They're not a one-for-all guy or gal who's responsible for the entire network. But so what would happen is you would have multiple accounts, right? So obviously this is my account, but maybe like Luke has an account because Luke and I work on stuff all the time. So what it'll actually do is it will keep track of who made the change, when they made the change, and then using these little dots, we can actually see what they did, right? So this would be great if you're, within your troubleshooting, somebody goes, yeah, I mean, everything was working great up until Tuesday, right? So what you could do is you could look in here at Tuesday and kind of see, what changes were made. It's a great one for when you ask your coworker, hey, did you do anything on Tuesday? He said, no, I didn't. And then you come in here and you can prove them wrong, right? You can say, hey, no, I actually saw that you made a change to that SSID on Tuesday, and now we're having a bunch of issues, right? So here we have, again, the events piece. This one's going to have a lot more different types, right? And again, maybe we only care about the reboots, right? So we can just filter on the reboots. This also has a live events that we can run that will tell us various things about, as they literally happen, what events are happening, and we can keep track of them here. This is very useful. Within the tools section, again, we kind of looked at this already, where we can do pings and we can do commands, right? So that's a lot of the, just the viewing stuff that you can do. Let's actually get into the configuration piece here, right? So what we can do here is, over here is what's called configuration groups. And they are places where you place things that have like configuration, okay? So for instance, on my demo DC group here, what we'll have is we'll have all of our switches, okay? And we can either click within the switch to make changes just in the switch, or we can send, so for instance, say we wanted to add a VLAN to both of these switches. We can do it at this level, this configuration group level, and we could push a VLAN to all the switches at once if we wanted to, okay? And how that kind of looks is, so here we have some of my ProCurve switches, right? So if I wanted to push a VLAN to all of those switches, I hit this configuration button, right? And here we have the GUI configuration for a ProCurve switch, right? I can do things like I can go into the individual interfaces if I wanted to. I could push routes. Say we had a new subnet that got put up that we needed to push a route to over for another site. We can do that here. I'm just going to simply do add another VLAN. So when I click on the VLANs here you'll have the VLANs that are on this whole group. So what I can do here is I can add a new VLAN. So I'll add VLAN 515, you know, and just call it VLAN 515. You know, we could set it, let's make it a voice VLAN. And then we can pick what ports get that VLAN. Do they want, you know, if you click on this port here, we can select, do you want it tagged or untagged, whatever. We can push that down to the entire group at once. So what's nice about that is you don't need to click into each switch, add VLAN 515. You can literally push it to all of the switches at once, right? The same can be done with the access points. So here we have all of our access points. If I wanted to, I could click an individual access point and make configuration changes. But here we can, you know, this is one of the ones where we were talking about YouTube, right? So maybe we want to block YouTube. We can go in here, we can find our guest VLAN. And here we can go into our access tab. Right now it's unrestricted, but let's restrict it, okay? So based on what we saw earlier, we can find the application of YouTube. We can block it, right? We could put a time range on this if we wanted to. We could put the user in the blacklist or the deny list. We could do that automatically. So just by doing this and hitting save, that whole WLAN now, we are blocking YouTube on it. So we can use Central to help us figure out what we need to do, right? Because we can see this long term. We don't, you know, within the Aruba Instant virtual, you know, the virtual controller, you can only see like 15 minutes of data. Well, what if somebody, you know, what if it's 3 p.m. and all of that stuff was happening around lunchtime, right? Now we can actually see that because Aruba Central is going to keep, you know, up to that month or 3 months of information for us. So that's a little bit about how that works there. And again, we can go into individual devices, right? So if maybe I need a VLAN 516 only on this switch, right? I can actually click on the switch, click on device, and it will bring up the config of that actual device. So here we go to the VLANs tab. You'll see the 515 is already there, but here we can add our 516, right? Save the settings, and that will only be present on that switch. If we wanted to, you know, we could take port 5 and we could tag that VLAN, click OK. You know, and now it's tagged on there. You don't need to know any CLI whatsoever, which is the key, right? Because some people don't have the time to learn all the various vendors' CLI, right? What's cool about this though is that we can go in and we can run commands still through here. So if some of that, you know, nitty gritty information where you need the CLI, we can still do it here. The other thing we can do, which is really cool, is we can actually console right into the switch from here. So as this comes up, we'll have the full prompt. And then what's great is from here, we can run all our show commands, right? So what's nice about this is if we go into config, we type like interface 1, it'll actually not let us even make configuration because it wants all of the configuration in Aruba Central. What's cool is we can actually tell a device, say we're in a pinch, right? And Aruba Central is not allowing us to make configuration changes. We can actually take a device out of Aruba Central, right? So what I'm going to do here is if you type Aruba Central disable, this will actually allow to do the full command set on this switch, right? Yeah, so I just killed myself out of that, which is fine, right? Because I pulled it out of Aruba Central. However, there's a way around that. 100.5, okay. So if I go into my other switch, we'll console into this guy. should be able to SSH right into that switch from here. So imagine you're on site, right? We've ran that command. What's cool now is now I can go into the interface, right? So before, yeah, Aruba Central was trying to say, hey, I want to do all the configuration. And it does that on purpose, right? What you don't want is you don't want mismatch configuration. You don't want somebody, you know, acting like a cowboy, just doing their own thing, you know, shooting from the hip you want it all done in one centralized location. How else do we keep track of this stuff, right? So from here, you know, I can add configuration, etc. Right? But the link to central is broken right now. So I could make all of these configuration changes as soon as I do turn Aruba Central back on, right? What's going to happen is even if there's configuration on this device, it's going to get overwritten by the configuration in Aruba Central. But that's the key to this. That's why Aruba, that's why I think their product is the best out there. Is there's a CLI and we can always get to that CLI. The cloud, we are not, you know, the cloud doesn't completely take over and disallow us to do things. We can always, you know, go back to the way that things were done before with a CLI locally, right? And that's both with their access points and their switches. All of your hardware information's here as well. You know, I don't really, some of this stuff is, you know, whatever, but it's nice about like, if your power supplies are having issues, etc. So that's on that end, right? And one of the last things I'll kind of get in here is, again, that was the Pro Curve switching. This is the CX switching, right? Which is a little different, right? It's a cloud native operating system. I mean, it's got a full blown computer in it. You can go down into Bash on the thing if you want to. It's pretty cool. So this works a little different, right? So what this does is this uses, it's a bit of a different GUI experience. And then there's also a piece called multi-edit, but I think you'll see the value in that, right? So if I go into this actual switch here, you'll see this looks a little different, right? This is the UI configurator or configuration piece of a CX switch. So what we can do here, right, is I can go into the ports, and the CX OS works a little different than the ProCurve OS did. So what we can do here is we can select like port 8, and you'll see here you can set it up as a trunk port. We can set our native VLANs, our allowed VLANs. You know, we can give it a description, test port. Hit save, and it'll push that information down to that switch for us. Right, so you can manage the ProCurve in here. You can manage the CX in here, and if you don't know CLI, they still have the UI there for you to use. Right, you know, we can change the login information. We can add more VLANs here. So similarly to how I added that other VLAN, right? We can do VLAN 515 here. We could put voice on it. We don't want to just hit add, and it'll push it down to that switch, right? We could also go back and do the same thing for the you know the group UI. So I could push. This is a little backwards, but it's all good. This is just a demo environment, right? So I could push 516. Here I'm pushing it to both switches at the same time. Okay, so that's the UI piece. Now, I know guys like Luke, they love the CLI. That's where Luke lives. That's what he does, right? So what they've added in here, which is really cool, is this thing called multi-edit, right? And there's an on-prem technology called NetEdit. That's pretty similar. So what this does is this allows us to actually get a CLI-based configuration for these devices, right? So what we can do here is we can select just this device, maybe, right? We can view the configuration if we want to. And here we're going to actually see the CLI config, right? It's not going to be UI based. It's going to be the literal CLI. So if you consoled into the switch and you did a show run and hit enter, this is what you would actually see, right? So what's cool about this is we can actually edit this in a CLI way, which, you know, the traditional CLI guys are used to, right? So if we hit edit config on this switch, it's going to bring up that same window. And then what's cool about this is it's smart, right? So what I mean by that is it will try and tell you as you're typing commands, it'll try and give you like suggestions like, hey, this is pretty, you know, typical. You know, these are some of your options. But what else is cool is if you're new to the CLI, right? You can see here how the VLANs want to kind of be in this section of the UI. Well, I can click anywhere. Well, let's just start up here, right? And I'll hit enter. And what it's going to do is it's going to watch what I do and try and help me along the way, right? So if I do VLAN, I don't know, do 115, right? And if I hit enter here, it knows that that command is not supposed to be up there, and it's actually going to move it for me to the correct spot, right? But here you can do things like we can do name, right? I screwed that up. It's going to get very mad at me here because I didn't follow the rules. So yeah, so there it's saying, hey, this isn't right. You did this wrong. You need to, you know, this is an area of concern that isn't going to push well down to the switch, right? So what we can do here is here it'll actually tell you like this is where you're supposed to put in a name. So you could do test VLAN, right? And now if I hit enter, it should, using, you know, it's the system that has, it goes, oh yeah, this is a good configuration. I can hit save here. And then what we can do is on the configuration status part, right? We can actually see if the configuration has been synced yet. And if somebody like goes in and makes some sort of change, we can see a difference between the running config and what it means to push. We can also, from in here, you could put in a bunch of changes and then it'll show you like, hey, these are the changes you're going to make when you hit save, right? So here I can click the configuration status. And there's this thing you can do called auto commit. So auto commit will, if you're going to push the configuration, or if you hit save, it pushes it automatically. What we can do is we can turn that off so that it only pushes the commands when you're ready to have it push the commands, which is helpful because if you don't have a planned downtime, you may want to wait until that planned downtime so that you don't infuriate your users, you know, bouncing switches up and down or ports or whatever VLAN they're in, okay? So then it'll, this will synchronize up and it'll say synchronize just like this one, right? So that multi-edit, what's cool about multi-edit, right? If we go back, go to the list of the switches here, we can actually do that multi-edit on one switch only if we want to, right? So we can go into DC Rack 2, the device here, and we can check this box. And now when this comes up, we're ready to do the same thing. We can view the config, we can edit the config, etc. The other thing is, and this, I have a feeling this is going to be expanding out. You know, I don't have anything official on that, but if you go into the Express config, currently there are just two options here, but eventually there's going to be more options. So here's like what's called a device profile, right? So what that is it reads the LLDP entry. Like if I plug in Aruba AP right now in the LLDP, it'll come up as a default Aruba AP, and I can auto push when it sees that, you know, when it sees that, what does it do? How does it set up the port? You know, do you want to do jumbo frames? Do you want to set a PoE priority to critical? And if I hit save here, it will then push that to the switch automatically for me. Cause that's a couple of commands, you know, there's two different parts in the CLI. You know, if you don't know what you're doing, it might be a little confusing. Here, they simplify it for you, right? And the other thing that's cool in here is the network analytics engine, the NAE. Here they have some pre-built scripts. So if you want to monitor your spanning tree more aggressive, or not more aggressive, more in-depth logging and monitoring than normal, we can push this script to the switch, right? And what this will do is in the actual alerts and events, we will see additional logs on top of what's normally built into the OS will be in this list here from the NAE itself, which is it's like a whole scripting language where you can use Python to push and pull all kinds of information and have different tasks that happen when like things like a spanning tree, when there's a topology change, you can have it run some commands and send you those commands. So yeah, that's a bit about that. I know I'm going over a lot of stuff here, but there's a lot to this, you know. I've seen Aruba Central through a lot of iterations, and it just keeps getting better, and it just keeps getting more in depth and more detailed, and there's just more things we can do. There's also another way that you can do configuration, which is called a template group. So template groups are used especially in places with lots of sites or lots of switches. And how this works is this is more of code snippets, right? So what this is we can create a template. We can use that template and push it to multiple switches, right? And what that template does is that template is essentially our CLI. But what we can do is we can add variables in here. So for instance, this route here, imagine we had multiple sites. They'd have, you have a couple L3 connected sites. They're going to have, maybe they have different routes. Maybe they have different DNS servers, right? What we can do here is we can create a variable called DNS server, for instance, right? And we can take this script with all of these variables and we can push it to these switches. And then what we do is we upload a variable file in here, which would have the DNS servers or the IP routes or the ports that need to be tagged or untagged, etc. And we can only push the variables that apply to that switch to that switch. So maybe site 1 needs port 10 through 15 untagged, and then it needs port 16 through 20 tagged, but then the other sites, the inverse, we can push that using those actual variables. So there are multiple ways to do configuration, and what's nice about that is these different configuration ways, they kind of scale depending on what you're doing. You know, if you only have a couple switches, maybe a one switch in a closet, you know, you might as well just do the UI based if you don't need a bunch of the CLI stuff. Now, there always is the ability to do those templates where you can do any CLI command you want. But a lot of times for what a lot of people do, especially in edge closets, this UI config is more than good enough. Some other stuff that's in here. There's this thing called a cloud guest. So what this is imagine you have multiple buildings or multiple sites, right? And at each building, they have their own little instant cluster. Well, maybe you don't want to have to recreate the same captive portal page for each site. So what we can do is we can actually make a single captive portal page and we can push it to each site. So every site will have the exact same captive portal page. Maybe it looks like this. And then when maybe you have like a BYOD network, right? And your staff member comes on site and they join their cell phone to that. And then here they type John Smith and the password or whatever, and they hit sign in. It will then keep track of who they are in this visitors page, right? And then we can use that same splash page at every single, I'm not using it here, so that's why it says that, but we can use that at every single site. We can see all of our IDS attempts here. This is great, especially if you're in a really busy downtown area. We've seen some K-12s where kids get a little crazy with some Raspberry Pis and they start attacking the Wi-Fi. We can see that from here. You can expand this and see detailed information about that, right? We should be able to search that too. Right. So here we can actually here it'll actually in this context, it'll actually show us how to do this, right? So if we hit view on that, hang on a sec. There's like tutorials on here where it'll tell you where to click, but it might not have liked where I was. Give me a second here. All right, I'm just gonna skip that for now. Might be because I went into default. Default, like a bucket where it, whenever you have a new device that doesn't have a home per se, it will put it in the default location. Here, I'm just gonna kick this out because I think it's actually trying to take me to that location where to make that security change. So I'm gonna start that over. And then one of the last things that I kind of wanted to show, which can be super helpful, especially if you don't have IT staff at some of your sites, is there's a sensor that Aruba has called a user experience insight, a UXI sensor, right? And what's cool about that is we can actually, oh, this thing's angry. All right, give me a sec. We're just gonna kill it. All right. I upset it. Tried to do too much HTML5. It wasn't a fan of it, right? So what this is it's a little like a puck. It almost looks like an AP. And there's two of them. There's one that's kind of looks like a pillar that you can put on a wall. And then there's one that's like a smaller AP. And what that does here is it acts like a client at your various sites. And then what's cool is it actually pumps that information into Aruba Central. So that device is wired and wireless at my demo design building. So here it says, hey, everything is great, right? Well, what does that mean? If we click on that, it'll actually take us into that portal where we have the sensor, and the sensor is doing various tests, right? So we're doing core pings, we're pinging Google and Quad9's DNS. We're doing these various tests, and then what it's doing is it's actually keeping track of all of that information for us, right? So what we can do is we can look at a moment in time and see if we had jitter, packet loss, latency, etc. So if this sensor runs into issues, it will notify you in here. So if you have one of these sensors at each one of your branch sites, it'll keep track of the user's experience on the wire and on the wireless for you. Because it's really hard to get the analytical data from what the actual client is experiencing, right? We can see things from the AP perspective. We can see things from the switch perspective. But a lot of times, like an Android phone, it's really hard to see what that phone's going through. But what this device does is it acts like a client. And so here you can see it joins my various Wi-Fi networks. It runs those tests on these Wi-Fi networks, and it will show us, hey, maybe there was latency and jitter on the guest network, but there wasn't latency and jitter on your production network. And then you can try and investigate what's going on with that. Let me dive in this thing. It's not happy. Let's reset that. Last 24 hours. Might be because I had my custom filter on there. See if the Ethernet one works any better. I don't know. I am having some fun on the web today. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So here we had a dip in that there. We can do look at our DNS here as well. Here's what you're going to see a lot of times, right? Is you're going to see weird DNS issues. And here we can actually see, you know, moment in time. Here there's the retries went up a bit. So we can kind of correlate some of this information to help figure out what's going on. But what's cool is that this, like I said, this, you know, it's kind of this experience of red, yellow, green, you know, just like a quick, hey, take a look at this 1,000-foot view. And that actually pumps directly into there. So that's actually what that piece is right there. So another very important piece, which I probably should have got to right away, but that's okay, is the alerting, right? So what we can do in the alerting is we can configure this so that depending on the alerts we care about, it sends emails and stuff to us, right? So for instance, like a good one here is an AP disconnect. Like I really want to know when an AP disconnects because wireless is a tier 0 technology now. As soon as it goes down, you get nothing but complaints, right? That's just how it works. So what we can do here is we can add the AP disconnect and we get to say how long and what severity this does. So we can say critical. So maybe if it's down for 5 minutes, right? And then we can select the groups we care about, the labels we care about, sites we care about. Like, so for instance, I would select all of the wireless, right? And then we can email that information off to who we want to, okay? Well, what if we're doing a downtime? What if we want to be taking things down? We can actually go within the site here. Where is my... in here? There it is. We can go within the site and we can say suppress these alerts. So if I know that Luke's going to go in the site and he's going to rip a bunch of stuff out and replace it or whatever, I can suppress those alerts so that I don't get them. I can also override who gets these emails. So if I have IT staff at multiple buildings, well, maybe building 5, I don't care about that. I'm responsible for building 3. We can select who actually gets those alerts that we set. So that's also a very important piece that you'll want to set up. And then last, but certainly not least, is the reporting piece, right? So this reporting piece is great because what it can do is we can schedule reports or we can run them once. And what's great about these reports is these reports, we can pick what groups, what devices, etc. This is a bad report to choose. Are actually within that report, right? So we can do it as a PDF. We can CSV it. We can email it. There's a PCI compliance report, which is nice in here. Here's a switch capacity planning, which will tell us how many used ports, how many unused ports we have, you know, the PoE, stuff like that. All of that reporting is built right in here, and it works for, you know, wireless, wired, and the gateways if you choose to use them. So I think I'm going to stop there. You can push firmware through here. You can pick a time to do it. You can upgrade everything if you want. You can say upgrade in the future. You can set a compliance so that when a new firmware comes out, it upgrades. But that's, you know, it should be able to do that, and it does, and it does it well. So I'm going to stop there. I appreciate everybody's time. I know that was a lot of information. If you do have any additional questions or anything like that, or if you'd want a more specific demo, or maybe you want to look at pricing or talk about any of this stuff, let us know. There's some information. Some of you may even have my email, or reach out to your account manager, and we can set this up. I can talk this stuff all day, I'm sure, as you can tell. And yeah, Luke, was there any questions that you wanted me to answer, or were you able to take care of that?
There actually weren't any that I got.
Okay. All right.
Maybe we should, I can throw it out there here quick. If anyone does have any, this is the time to ask them. So.
All right. Okay. I'm going to stop my screen share. Cool. Well, if we don't have any questions, then I'll let everybody go a little bit early. I appreciate your time, everybody. And again, if you have any questions or anything like that, just reach out to your account manager and we can set something up. All right.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time. We really appreciate it.
All right. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks again, Luke.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, no